Resourceful Designer, episode 55, Setting Goals for Your Design Business.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He always wears slippers inside the house, Mark Dickote.
Welcome to Resourceful Designer. I am so glad that you've been able to join me today, plug me into your ears, and talk graphic design with me. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, I want to welcome you and thank you for tuning in. Now, this podcast is about running a graphic design business. If you came here looking for design tips or ideas about graphic design, I'm sorry, but this is the wrong place. In Resourceful Designer, I share tips and tricks about running your graphic design business, specifically focused on running a home-based graphic design business. So if that sounds intriguing to you, please stick around. And if you happen to be a long-time listener, welcome back. Now, this is the first episode of 2017. I took a little break over the holidays. Actually, I was going to release an episode last week, the first week of January, but my wife and both my kids were home, and it just seemed like too hectic not to sit down and record with too much noise going on in the house, so I decided to put it off by another week. But I am so happy to be back with you again and look forward to a great 2017 as we grow our graphic design business. Now, I want to remind you that any and all links that I do mention in this episode will be available on the show notes page at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 55. And now, as always, I'd like to start off the episode with a resource of the week. And this week's resource is a website called Free, Fee, or Flee. Now, this is a website put out by the RGD, which is the Registered Graphic Designers Association of Ontario. And you can find it at freefeeflee.ca. Now, what this website does is it helps you decide when it's okay to work for free. When somebody comes to you and say, hey, can you just do this project for free or pro bono? This will help you decide when you should be doing it for free, when you should be charging, or when you should just walk away, or in some cases, run away from the project. Now, they also provide you with suggestions on how to respond to help explain where you stand in the situation. So it's a really fun, well-done website, and you just click around on the different things, and it'll give you ideas on whether or not you should take on the project, and if so or if not, what you can tell the person asking you. So check it out at freefeeflee.ca. And now, setting goals for your design business. Now, I'm talking about goals, not necessarily resolutions. I know it's January, or at least at the time I'm recording it, it's January. Maybe when you're listening it could be any time of the year, but it's still all the same. I'm talking about goals. Now, this time of year is usually set aside for resolutions, and that's all fine. But where resolutions are more ongoing, like becoming a better illustrator or maybe improving on your coding skills, goals, on the other hand, have some sort of end or target to achieve. So that's why I want to talk about goals for your graphic design business. And even though this is January and it is the time of year where people set goals and set resolutions, you don't need to do it in January. You can set up a goal at any time of the year. In fact, you should be setting goals on a regular basis. If you don't set goals, how do you know if you're actually succeeding at anything? You need goals in order to stay measured and to record and register that success that you achieve. You see, goals are important to keep you motivated. They give you focus. And as I said, they give you a measure for your progress. Now, chances are you've probably heard of the acronym SMART goals. Now, don't go turning off the podcast and saying, oh, I've heard this 1,000 times, because I'm going to put a little twist on it, and I'm going to talk about smarter goals. Now, if you've never heard about SMART goals, then stay tuned. You're in for a little treat here as I break down what this means, specifically for your graphic design business. So, as I mentioned, SMARTER is an acronym, and it stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-related, evaluate, and reward. So let me start off with specific. Whenever you set goals, you have to set precise goals, something with a target. If not, you won't be able to focus your efforts to achieve it. Any goal you make should answer these questions. What do I want to accomplish? Why is this goal important? Who, if anyone, is involved? and which resources are required to complete this goal. If you're able to answer one or more of these questions, then you have a specific goal. An example would be, I want to get 3 new web design clients in the first quarter of this year. That is a specific goal. What do I want to accomplish? I want to get 3 new web design clients. Why is this goal important? Well, because I'm a web designer and I want to get new clients in order to improve my business. Who, if anyone, is involved? Well, myself, but 3 new clients is what I want. Or at least 3 new projects. It might not necessarily be clients, but projects. And which resources are required to complete the goal? Well, I have to find the clients or find the projects, and I have to use my skills as a web designer in order to create the project. So I can answer any of these questions. So there is a specific goal. Now, next in the acronym is the M, which stands for measurable. Now, if your goal is not measurable, how are you going to know if you've made any progress? You see, knowing your progress can motivate you if you're doing well, or it can actually set a fire under your butt if you're not doing well. Assessing your progress helps you to stay focused. It helps you to meet your deadlines. In the process, you'll feel the excitement as you get closer to achieving that goals. When you're setting a goal that's measurable, it needs to answer these questions: either how much, how many, how long, and how will I know when it's accomplished? An example of something that's measurable is, I want to design 15 brand new websites this year. Well, that's easy to measure. Every time you design a new website, you can check one off. And at the end of the year, you can see, did I design 15 brand new websites this year? If not, then you know you didn't make the goal. If you designed 15 or more, then you know you've made your goal. It is very measurable. The next letter in the acronym is achievable. The goal you set for yourself, or goals, I should say plural because you're going to have more than one goal, obviously. But the goals you set for yourself need to be realistic and attainable. It's the only way they're going to be successful. In other words, it should be something that makes you stretch your abilities, but still remain possible. An achievable goal will usually answer questions such as, how can I accomplish this goal? And how realistic is this goal? So an example of an achievable goal is maybe something like, I want to help brand 3 new startups this year. Is that achievable? Sounds like it is. 3 startups and you want to help brand them. But how do I accomplish this goal? Well, first of all, you got to find those startups, which means you're going to have to put an effort into them in order to have them become clients and then help them to brand. And how realistic is this goal? Well, I've got an entire year to do it. So can I get a hold of 3 startups and help them out? I think it's realistic. So this is an achievable goal. Now, if you said I wanted to help 20 startups this year, I don't know. Depends on your market, I guess. But would that be achievable? That would be more than 1 startup per month that you'd want to help. Almost 2 per month. I know in my area, I don't even know if there's that many startups around for me to help. So that would not be an achievable goal. So you have to set a goal that you think is achievable. Now, the next letter in the acronym is relevant. Now, this step is all about making sure your goal matters to you and that it also aligns with your other relevant goals that you've set. As I mentioned earlier, you're probably going to set a bunch of goals for yourself over the year, over time. And you have to make sure with each goal you set that it's relevant with everything else that has to do with your business. Now, I'm not talking about personal goals. I'm talking today just about goals for your graphic design business. And it has to be important that your goals strengthen your business. Now, you know it's a relevant goal if you can answer yes to these questions. Does it seem worthwhile? Is this the right time? Does this match my other needs? Am I the right person to reach this goal? Is it applicable to my current business? If you can answer yes to these questions, then it is relevant. Now, if you answer no to some of these questions, then maybe that's not the right goal for you. See, an example could be myself. A few years ago, I took it upon myself to learn PHP and MySQL. Now, that is not something I really needed to do. It was just something I decided I wanted to do. And I started learning it, and I had a lot of trouble. For some reason, I was having trouble wrapping my brain around the whole thing, and which was frustrating because HTML and CSS came as a breeze to me. But when it came to PHP, I was having a little bit of trouble. And then finally, I realized that knowing PHP and MySQL would be an advantage, but it wasn't really something I needed. My business wasn't struggling because I didn't know that particular language. I wasn't losing clients because, in fact, whenever it came to PHP and MySQL, it was easy for me to find somebody else to farm it out to. So that goal that I had set for myself to learn that, I realized wasn't really relevant to my business. My business wasn't failing because I didn't know it. And knowing it, I didn't think would actually improve or make me succeed anymore because I had other people that can do it for me. So that was not a relevant goal. Even though it was a specific goal, It was measurable. I knew I had a deadline. There was a website I was currently working on, and I said I wanted to learn how to do this so that I can complete this website. So it was measurable. It was achievable because I'm sure if I would have kept at it, I could have learned it. But when it came to relevance, I realized that I really didn't need to know PHP MySQL in order to run a successful design business. So that's a goal I actually, after a certain amount of time, I gave up on it. I do know a little bit of the language, enough so that if I look at code, I can kind of figure out what's going on. But don't ask me to code something from scratch. I wouldn't do it. And the good thing about our industry is there's lots of other people out there that can do it. Now, the next letter in the acronym is time-related, or some people might say it's trackable, but it's kind of the same thing. You see, all goals need some sort of target date, some deadline. We are graphic designers. We work on deadlines. When clients give us something, a project, usually there's some sort of deadline involved. If you don't have a deadline, you have nothing to keep you focused, and there's nothing to work towards. So it's a very important part of the setting SMART goals is to have some sort of time-related or trackable target for you. Because without it, then you'll probably fall into the, I'll do it tomorrow syndrome. You know how it is. If you have something that doesn't have a deadline, well, you're really not motivated to do it today if there's other things you could do, especially if you're really busy and you have a whole bunch of things on your to-do list. Well, the things without deadlines always get put to the bottom of the list. And the things that do have time-related deadlines or something that's trackable, those are the ones that get pushed to the top of the list. So if you set yourself a goal, you need to have some way to track it or some sort of time frame that it needs to be done in. So any time-related goal will usually answer these questions. When do I need to work on things to achieve this goal? What do I need to do now? 6 weeks from now, 6 months from now? What can I do today? If you can answer any of these questions, then you do have a time-related goal. An example is, say you know there's a trade show coming up locally. Like I know here in my local area, every spring they have a trade show. Well, I know the date of that trade show. Well, if I want to be at that trade show, if I want to set up a booth, then I know that I have to get all my marketing material put together and ready, printed, and everything I need to do in order to reach that date to go to that trade show. Now, maybe I'm not going to the trade show. Maybe I'm going to target clients that I know will be at that trade show and they might need some stuff designed. Well, now I've got to figure out, okay, time related, if they're going to this trade show, let's just say the trade show is at the end of May. Well, when do I need to have stuff printed for them to be able to get their stuff for the trade show at the end of May? Well, let's aim for the beginning of May. Well, if I need stuff printed for the beginning of May, when do I have to have final designs to the printer? And then you keep backing stuff up and figuring out, okay, well then I need to have the designs completed by this date. And if the designs need to be completed by such and such a date, that means the design should really be started by this date, which it gives me enough time to work on it and so forth. And if designs need to be started by this date, that means I have to get the clients by this. And you can track all this time-related stuff, and then you come up with the situation saying, okay, there's a trade show in the end of May. Well, if I want to find clients to work on their marketing material for this trade show, I need to find these clients by, say, the end of January or the beginning of February in order for me to have enough time to do everything in order for them to get their material in hand for the end of May. So this is something that's all time-related. You can set specific times. Now, it doesn't have to be something like that. It could be some of the things I said earlier, like I want to help 3 brand new startups this year. Well, that's this year. In 2017, at the time I'm recording this, by the end of the year, I want to help brand 3 new startups. Well, that is time related. You've got a year. In my very first example for specific, I said design 3 new websites in the first quarter. Well, the first quarter of the year, and you know you have 3 months. By the end of March, if you haven't completed 3 website projects, then you did not reach that goal. So it's time related. Very important when you're setting your goal. Now, to those of you that were familiar with the whole SMART goals, I mentioned at the beginning that I was talking about smarter goals today. And that means there's 2 more letters to the acronym. And the first one is the letter E, which stands for evaluate. You set goals for yourself. And that's great. You set a goal at the beginning and you might know everything, all how to measure it, whether it's relevant, achievable, time related. I just mixed those letters up. It should be achievable, then relative, but regardless. But as you're going through to achieve this goal, you need to stop and evaluate. As you proceed in the steps to accomplish your goal, you should be stopping from time to time to evaluate your progress, to make sure you're still on track. And is your goal still achievable? Maybe you thought your goal was achievable and then something came up, or for one reason or the other, you're looking, and as the deadline or the time-related aspect of your goal is approaching, you realize, whoa, wait a minute, I might not be able to do this. Or maybe your goal is to increase profits this year and the year's coming to an end and you realize that you wanted to increase your profits by say 10% and you've only increased them by 7%. Well, then you have to start thinking, okay, well, I only have a month or two left. What can I do to get that extra 3 or 4 or whatever percent in profits? So you need to sit and evaluate. And the questions you can ask in this part is, do I need to adjust anything about my goal? And it's okay to adjust things. If for some reason you set a goal out and you're working along on it and you realize, I don't know if this is possible anymore. It's okay to change a goal. They're not set in stone. If you say, I want to get 15 new web design clients this year, and the year's coming to an end, and you realize there's only a month left and you only have 10, and you're saying, well, there's no way I can do 5 in this 1 month. Well, maybe you can say, well, okay, I'm not going to achieve that goal, but let me reevaluate and say, I've got a month left. I could do 2 more. Let's reset the goal to 12. It's not as good. Yes, you're maybe failing in your original goal, but if you reevaluate and then say, I can do 12, then you still have a month left to get those 2 extra ones. And if you happen to do 13, bonus. And if not, it's not really a big deal, but you have to reevaluate and see if there's anything you can change. Or maybe the reevaluation is not changing the goal, but deciding that there's something you have to do different in order to ensure success. Using the same example, if you wanted to do 12 web design projects this year and 6 months, halfway through the year, you realize that you've only done 5. Well, what is it that you're doing? What can you do differently in order to achieve that 15? You still have to do 10. You did 5 in the first 6 months. Can you do 10 in the second? Yes, you can do 10 in 6 months, but what do I have to change? Do I have to go out and get new clients? Do I have to, whatever? You have to reevaluate and say, what can I do differently? Maybe it's your time frame. Maybe it's the way you measure things. Who knows? But you reevaluate and say, okay, I have to change something in order to succeed. Maybe, for example, you say, in the next 2 months, I want to get 3 new clients. But when you set that goal, you completely forgot that your family is going to take 2 weeks off to go on vacation and you're closing down your business for 2 weeks. Well, if that wasn't taken into consideration and you realize that within those 2 months, you actually have a month and a half instead of 2 months, well, maybe you're not going to be able to achieve that goal. So you reevaluate and say, okay, well, maybe instead of doing that goal within 2 months, I'm going to do it in 2.5 months so I can take into account the 2 weeks that we'll be away on vacation. So reevaluate and see if the goal is still achievable, and if it looks a little iffy, what can you do to change it to either achieve that goal by changing the goal or changing your process in order to achieve the original goal? Now, the final letter in the acronym is R. And the R actually stands for 2 things. Now, the first one I want to talk about is reward. Reward yourself. If you set a goal, especially if it's a long-term goal, like over the year or over several months, I'm not talking about a goal like, I want to do something by the end of the week, which you should be setting those type of goals as well. I want to accomplish something by the end of the week. Maybe it's a goal for the day. I want to accomplish something by the end of the day. You sit down in the morning, you make your to-do list, and these are the 3 or 4 or 5 items I need to complete by the end of the day, and hopefully you scratch them all off. But for your bigger goals, you might want to think about rewarding yourself. Now, yes, achieving or completing your goal is in itself a reward. You set a goal, you've achieved it, yay, pat yourself on the back. However, depending on the scope of the goal, it may help motivate you if you set yourself a special reward for getting there. After all, don't you deserve something more than a simple pat on the back for your hard work and hard effort? Setting a reward can be a super great motivator in helping you achieve your goal. An example could be, let's say your goal is that this year I want to increase my profits 15% over last year. And if I do make 15% more profit this year than I did last year, I'm going to take my family on a tropical vacation. Now that is a great goal. You set the goal. And if it's something you're going to stick to, if you only make a 10% profit, then no tropical vacation. Maybe the vacation will just be a drive to a nearby city or something not as exotic as a tropical vacation. But if you set that goal, that gives you something to work towards. Maybe if you do something, you're going to buy yourself that new car, or maybe the new computer, or the second monitor, or some sort of equipment. It might have to do with your business. It might not, but you can set yourself that sort of reward. Now, as I mentioned, the R actually stands for two things: reward, but it also stands for repeat. If you've succeeded in your goals, you've gone through your SMARTer goals, your specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-related, you've evaluated, and maybe you've rewarded yourself. Well, then repeat. If you've succeeded in reaching your goal, why not try again? Either with the same goal or next time set a harder one. If you set a goal to gain 10 new clients in the next 6 months, and 3 months from now, you've achieved that goal. You've got 10 clients or 10 new clients. There's no reason to say, well, I've reached that goal. I don't have to work for the next 3 months because I've already reached that goal. If you've reached it, set a new goal. You said, wow, I got 10 clients in 3 months and I wanted to get them in 6 months. Well, let's set another goal. Do I try for another 10 clients in the next 3 months and double it? You could. Or you can say, let's just reset that goal and say, from this point, I'm giving myself another 6 months to get 10 new clients and go from there. So you can either do that, or maybe you say, from this point, I want to set another 6-month goal, but instead of 10 new clients, because that was pretty easy, I'm going to set 15 clients as my goal. So either repeat the goal or maybe repeat it, but change it up, make it a little bit harder. Either decrease the time frame. Instead of 6 months, you're going to do it in 3 months, or increase the scope of it, the measurability. Instead of 10 clients, I'm going to get 15 clients. Now, the other thing is, if you happen to fail at your goal, I was just talking about if you succeed, but what if you fail? If you say, I'm going to get 10 clients in the next 6 months, and 6 months goes by and you've only got 7 new clients, well, that's still okay. Maybe you don't reward yourself, but you reassess, you regroup, and you repeat. You say, okay, I wanted 6 months to get 10 clients. I only got 7. Well, let's try again. There's no shame in not reaching your goal. There's only shame if you actually give up. So set yourself up. Okay, in the next 6 months, I'm going to try again for another 10 clients. Maybe you want to reassess and say, instead of 10, I'm going to go for 7. I reached 7 in the first 6 months. Let's do another 7 in this 6 months. And if you happen to reach 10, great. But repeat your goals. When the goal is finished, unless your goal is, I want to save up enough money to buy a new computer. And then once you bought that new computer, well, you're not going to repeat that goal and save up money to buy another computer. Maybe you're going to put money aside for something else. Maybe you want a new cell phone or a new tablet or whatever for the office, or maybe it's something else. And maybe the goal is just to save money for things. But if that goal is finished, then there's no point resetting or repeating it. But you can set other goals, and some goals should be repeated. If you say, I want to increase my profits by 10% this year, and at the end of the year, whether you succeeded or not, there's nothing wrong with setting up a new goal the following year saying, I want to set up another 10% increase. And if so, that means your business would be growing year after year. So this final part, so many people talk about SMART rewards, but this SMARTer reward, I think, is much more relevant to our businesses. Adding the E and the R for evaluate, to see how things are going as you're progressing through your goal, towards your goal, and the R for reward yourself if you do accomplish it, and repeat. When the goal is finished, whether successful or not, reset. Because it doesn't matter if you fail. It's a goal. It's not the end of the world. Henry Ford is the one that said, failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. So reset your goals. If your goal was way out there, if you said, I wanted to get 50 new clients this year and you only ended up with 15, you know that goal was, first of all, you over-evaluated the achievable part of it, but reset the goal for the next year and see maybe about getting 20 clients instead of 50. Or you reach 15 this year, maybe set a goal for 15 or whatever. So it doesn't matter if you fail the goal, just restart and do it more intelligently. Another quote, Richard Branson says, do not be embarrassed by your failures. Learn from them and start again. Same thing. If you fail your goals, learn what you did wrong and then reset, repeat. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, is setting goals for your business. In order to succeed, you need to set these goals for yourself. Otherwise, there's no way to know if you are improving. If you can't measure something, there's no scale for you to judge it by. So set goals. Now, before I recorded this podcast, I did set out this question in the Resourceful Designer Facebook group. And if you're not a part of the Facebook group, you really should join. Simply visit resourcefuldesigner.com/group, and it'll redirect you to the page. You just click on the join button and I will let you in. Now, I did ask in the Facebook group, what is your number one goal regarding your design business in 2017? And here's some of the answers I got. Freddie wants to sign 2 brand strategy clients and resign from his day job to run his own business. Tyler's goal is to become busy enough to need an outside office out of his home. Dan wants to do quality work to drive his reputation upward and increase exposure and opportunity through organic growth. Stacy wants to make enough money to pay off her student loans. Oh, I feel your pain, Stacy. Brian wants to attend Adobe Max and to double his income this year. It's a specific goal. It's measurable. Achievable? Well, only he knows if it's achievable. Relevant for sure, and time related. It does fall into those categories. You will be able to evaluate over time. And Brian, if you're lucky, you can repeat it again next year and double once again. So good luck. Molly, she wants to expand her client base beyond just her dog niche and move into other livestock as well. Seems to me I talked about this in a podcast not too long ago, didn't I, Molly? Good luck. We're rooting for you. Now, Carmilla wants to launch her web design business and get that first paying client. Do you remember when that was you, when you were starting off and you were looking for your first client? Wow, Carmilla, I hope it happens pretty quick and that you get lots more than just that first client, but it's a great goal to set. Now, Aaron, who's new to the business, wants to spend 20 hours per week on his design business. He wants to complete 3 paid projects and use the money to upgrade his computer. Very specific, measurable, and I think attainable. Now, Sean wants to finish his new website to better showcase his work. And Catherine wants to get certified as an Adobe expert, learn 3D programs, and to find clients she wants to work with and get rid of the clients she doesn't want to work with. Good call, Catherine. So those were the answers from the Facebook group. And there's lots of other questions and comments and all sorts of stuff happening in the Facebook group. So I do encourage you to join. We would love to have you there. Now, personally, from my end, my goals is I want to focus more on my local clients this year. Over the past year or two, I've gotten so many great clients. I'm not complaining. They're great clients, international clients and clients far away. But in the process, I've been neglecting my local community and I haven't been really marketing myself in this area and growing my local client base. As I said, I'm getting busier because I'm getting more international, like American and overseas. I'm getting those sort of clients. But there's still a wealth of clients nearby that I could be working with, but I'm ignoring them. So that's one of my goals this year is to get, I haven't actually written down my goal yet, but I would probably say maybe 5 to 8 new local clients this year, either print design or web design. Doesn't matter as long as I get them as new clients. Once we get the client, then you build that relationship and all sorts of stuff can come from that. You know, I've talked about that before. Now, my other goal this year is because of this podcast, I love talking graphic design. I would love to get a speaking gig. I want to approach some schools, probably some colleges or universities with graphic design classes, and I would love to go in and talk to the graduating class and maybe give them a little heads up on what to expect once they reach the quote unquote real world. So those are a couple of my goals for 2017. But what are your goals? I would love to hear what goals you've set for your business for 2017. If you're in the Facebook group, please leave a message there. You can continue commenting on that thread that's going, or visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 55 and leave a comment on the show notes page. I would love to know what sort of goals you've set for yourself. And now I'm happy to present you this week's question of the week that came from Jordan. But before I get to Jordan's question, I want to remind you, if you have a question you would like me to answer on a future episode of the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback, where you can fill out the form and submit your question, and I will try to answer it on a future episode of the podcast. So Jordan's question is, should I charge a different rate for my web design compared to my graphic design? He says, I'm including app and game development under web design, as well as he mainly codes in JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Well, Jordan, this is something I've seen over the years. Different designers have different takes on this. Now, personally, I have never changed my rate depending on the job I was providing. I've always charged a fixed rate. My hourly rate has never fluctuated depending on the task I was doing, whether it was print design, whether it was graphic design, even if it was just, somebody gives me something and I have to type 50 pages and just typing, which is something that, I don't like doing, but if I'm going to type for you, I'm going to charge you my full hourly rate, even though I'm not really designing or anything like that. Now, one thing you could consider about this in regards to changing your rate is depending on how you charge. If you have an hourly rate, then maybe that's what you're talking about. But you can also do project-based pricing and value-based pricing. And if you do those, then you can eliminate this whole dilemma on whether or not you should change the rates. And if you want to know more about hourly versus project versus value-based pricing, listen to episode 11, which you can get to by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 11, where I talk about the different pricing strategies for your graphic design business. But if you're doing project-based pricing or value-based pricing, well, let's talk about project-based pricing, where say somebody comes in and says, I want a website. Instead of saying, okay, well, I'm going to charge you X amount per hour, just say, well, I'm going to charge you this total price for the website. Then it doesn't really matter about your hourly rate and whether you charge less or more for different parts of it. Now, I do know some designers that do what you're talking about. Some of them will say, well, when I'm designing a website, I'll just throw a number out. Let's say they charge $100 an hour to design the website, design all the pages. But once the pages are designed, adding the content to the page, and maybe they have 20, 30, 40 pages they need to add content to, well, they're not going to charge their clients $100 per hour to add content. Maybe they charge the clients $30 an hour because all they're doing is copying and pasting content onto the web page. And some people do that. I personally don't. If you want me to do that, my time is worth a certain amount and I'm going to charge you. If my rate was $100 and it didn't matter if I was designing or if I was just copying and pasting, if it's taking my time, I'm charging you $100 an hour. Now, the reason I don't like the different rates for different things is it can get really complicated to explain your bills to your clients, especially if you itemize things. Now, maybe you're in a situation where you're a traditional print designer and you want to get into web design, or you're a web designer and you're trying to get into print design. Or in your case, I don't know, maybe you're thinking if I'm doing JavaScript, I should be charging one rate as opposed to HTML and CSS. I don't know. But let's do the web and print thing. Let's say you are a print designer and you're getting into web design. Well, you can think to yourself, well, I charge $100 an hour. Let's keep that rate for this example. I charge $100 an hour. A client comes to me and they want a flyer, a one-page flyer done. Well, I say, yeah, okay, I can do that design in, let's say, it'll take me 2 hours to design this flyer. Well, I'm going to make $200 and my client's going to get a great flyer at a great price. But now if the client says, instead of a flyer, they want a one-page web page, maybe a landing page or something. And, I'm getting into web design. I'm not that proficient with it. It's going to take me maybe 3 or 4 hours to do that web page because, I got to figure some stuff out. Well, at $100 an hour, that means that's going to cost my clients $300 or $400 as opposed to $200 because I'm very proficient in graphic design. And that was actually the situation, Jordan, when I first started, because I was a print designer. That was my background. When I got into web design, I was very slow because I was just learning. At first, I was using programs like Adobe PageMill and then Go Live, and never got into Dreamweaver. I went from Go Live directly into hand coding. But when I started hand coding stuff, it really slowed my process down. I was building better websites because of it, but it slowed my process down. And what I did in those situations is because I knew I was slowing down, I didn't adjust my rates, but I adjusted the time that I would allocate to the job. So, for example, if I spent an hour coding a website, but I know that out of that hour, I spent 20 minutes Googling up how to do different CSS things or what was the HTML code for this. Well, I wouldn't charge my client for that 20 minutes that I spent researching or learning or maybe watching a YouTube video on how to do something or reading up a tutorial. I wouldn't charge my client for that time. So even though I spent an hour on that page, my client would only be billed for the 40 minutes that I actually worked on it at my full rate. So that's the way I see it, is if you're spending time doing other things, your client should not be charged for your learning, your watching tutorials as you're trying to get up to speed in order to help them. Now, on the point where you're actually working on the project, if you have an hourly rate, if you set your rate, again, I'll use $100. If your hourly rate is $100 per hour, you're worth $100 per hour regardless of what you're doing. You could be sitting down designing the next best logo in the world. And if you think your rate is $100 an hour, that's what your rate is. Now, I'm not going to get into project or value-based pricing. I'm just talking hourly here. Because if you're designing that great a logo, maybe it should be value-based pricing. But anyways, that's beside the point. But talking hourly, if you're designing something that great, you should be charging your full hourly rate. Now, if at the same time that client wants you to do something else that's very menial, like maybe you're typing something or I don't know, maybe, as I said, copy pasting, you're still worth $100 an hour. If that client wants to get on a conference call with you and discuss stuff for an hour, that's time you're spending with them and you should be charging them. And that's your full rate. You're not designing anything. You're not using your skills. You're just talking to them on the phone. But your time is worth that $100 an hour. Now, my thoughts on the whole whether or not you should adjust your rates. And I say no. Now, what you can do is if you're not comfortable or you don't think something is worth your time, you can hire either a virtual assistant to do something. If it's just copy and pasting or formatting, say you created a WordPress website for a client and they have, I don't know, maybe they pre-wrote 30 posts. You can get a virtual assistant to copy and paste and format those posts for you and pay that person $10, $15 an hour instead of you doing it and charging your client $100 an hour. Now, in some situations, you can do something like, I remember there was a client I had. He had an e-commerce store and we built it on a platform called PrestaShop. He was the only client I had ever installed PrestaShop, and I didn't know PrestaShop beforehand. It was something that was recommended, so I installed it. I learned how to use it. And again, while I was learning, I didn't charge my client, but I set everything up. Well, at some point, my client ended up messing up the website. He did something he wasn't supposed to, and something got messed up, and I didn't have a clue how to fix it. So I went online and I found somebody who was an expert in PrestaShop, and I asked them, I says, are you able to fix this problem? And the person said, yes, I should be able to do it. It'll take me 10 hours to fix the problem. And I said, okay. And they were going to charge me, I think it was $20 per hour to fix the problem for 10 hours. So $200. Well, at the time, I was charging $50 an hour was my rate. So I went to my client and I told them that this is the situation. It's going to take 10 hours to fix this. Are you okay with that? The client knew my rate was $50. I didn't tell my client that this other person was going to do it for $20. I just said, it's going to take 10 hours. Are you okay? And the client says, yes, I'm good with that. Go ahead and fix it. So I hired this guy for $20 an hour to fix the problem. He took 10 hours to do it. He billed me for $200, and I in turn billed my client for 10 hours at my time. My client didn't know that I wasn't the one doing it or the situation. I just fixed the problem for him, and I charged him $500. So I made $300 off of that, and I didn't actually have to sit there and touch things. So that's a situation. Could I have figured out the problem? Maybe. Probably, but it would have taken me, 20 hours at my rate. Well, it wasn't worth it. It was easier for me to hire somebody. And during those 10 hours that this guy was working on it at $20 an hour, I was working on other client projects making $50 an hour. And then I turned around and charged that same time to my client at $50 an hour. So you could almost say that during that 10 hours that I was spent designing for other clients, I was actually making $80 an hour during that time. The $50 that I was charging those clients and the $30 I made off this other guy that was doing the work for me. So I know I got a little bit off on a tangent there, Jordan. I don't know if this answers your question the way you want, but as I said, in my opinion, you're worth a certain amount regardless of what you're doing. If you're copying, pasting, if you're just typing, if you're coding, if you're designing, whatever it is you're doing, if you have a rate in mind that you're worth, that's what you're worth regardless of what you're doing. So that's my answer. If anybody has a different opinion, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 55. Leave your comments in the show notes if you think that I'm wrong. Maybe you think Jordan should be charging different depending on his graphic design and web design and that. Maybe it's the way you do it. I would love to hear your opinion because you just heard mine. So thank you for that question, Jordan. And I remind you, if you do want to have your question answered in a future episode, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and submit the form there with your question. Now, before I head off, I just want to thank Fu Teague from the USA who left me a 5-star review in iTunes. He or she wrote, Mark DeCote does a fantastic job at providing tips, tricks, options, and opinions, as well as advice for business owners in the design industry. His podcast is a wealth of information, and anyone who's currently running a design business or contemplating it should subscribe. Great content, reliable, and enjoyable. Thanks, Mark. Well, thank you. And if you would like to leave your very own iTunes review, regardless of what country you're in, simply visit resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, and that'll redirect you to my page on your iTunes store where you can leave a review. Now, before I head off, I want to remind you of this week's Resource of the Week, which is free, fee, or flee. which you can find at freefeeflee.ca. And this will help you decide whether or not you should take on a project when somebody asks you if you can do it for free. Whether you can do it as pro bono or whatever, this will give you advice as well as some things you can tell the person who is asking you depending on how you want to take the project on or not. So visit it, freefeeflee.ca. Now, in next week's episode, I'll be discussing how to get out of a productivity slump. Until then, I would love for you to share this podcast with any designers you know, anybody you think that could benefit from this podcast. I would love for you to share it with them. Just tell them to visit resourcefuldesigner.com. And if it's for the podcast, they can visit resourcefuldesigner.com/subscribe, and that'll take them to a page where, regardless if they're on an iPhone, an Android phone, or whatever, they can subscribe directly from there. So until next time, I wish you all the best in your graphic design business. I am Mark Decote, and as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.